Good afternoon. I'm Larry Mack here with Dr. George Makol from Aspire Allergy and Sinus, working at one of the two different locations they have here in the Tucson area. Hey, Dr. Makol, my apologies. Dr. Makol, thanks for popping by and hanging out with me a little bit today.
Sure.
So, I'm one of those people. I was born with horrible, horrible allergies. I love to hike. I love to go outside. I love to go do all this fun stuff. I actually one of those people that I hate cold weather. That's why I moved to Arizona. So I have a love-hate relationship with spring. I love it because I get to go outside, get to hike, get to enjoy the saguaros and everything. I hate it because I sneeze like crazy and do all that crazy stuff. And you at Aspire Allergy and Sinus, you guys are definitely the answer to a problem that a lot of people have here in Tucson, allergies.
Right. And spring is quite a season for us. Here in the desert, it's the big allergy season, that spring and then secondarily fall. The reason spring is such a big season is our trees, which could be massive in size and scope, release an awful lot of pollen. And everybody sees the Palo Verde yellow pollen, but there's also the mesquite pollen, which is yellow but not as prominent, and a number of other trees. And then we also have ragweed in the spring, which everybody else in the US has it in the fall.
Oh, we get ours in the spring though.
Yeah, spring and fall, but it peaks in spring. Whereas if you're from upstate New York or Massachusetts, where I was born, they have some rains in the late summer, and their ragweed season in August, September. And then they're fortunate because they have a freeze by Halloween, which ends it. We don't have a freeze here, so our season goes right through into December or January.
And this year, it seems like, to me at least, I'll go outside. It feels like the trees and the plants seem to be like, I swear last year they all bloomed at once. This year, it seems like some have bloomed. Some of the trees are still empty, but you could start seeing the leaves coming on. So I have a feeling it's kind of giving us a 1-2 punch this year.
Well, I think we've had some intermittent rain, and when we have winter rain that continues into early spring, it kind of cleans the air and you don't get much pollen, but then the plants are going to grow that much more. I think within a week, we're going to see Palo Verdes bright yellow. We're going to see mesquites moderately yellow. And the things you don't see, the ragweed here is short. So people from the Midwest, they're used to ragweed 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall. They have giant and short ragweed. Ours is slender and desert ragweed, and it might be 3 feet high. So you don't notice it when it's behind the Circle K or when it's in the alleys, and it doesn't grow where you have a cultivated garden. It's in where man's disturbed the soil, and then it's left to grow. And that, so between ragweed and the tree pollen, it's a double threat in the spring.
So is that what is making everybody sneeze this time of year? Is it just that, or is there flowers blooming too? Does that add to it at all?
Well, flowers aren't as much of a problem because they're pollinated by bees and by birds, whereas a mesquite tree just throws tons of pollen in the air for 3 or 4 miles around it to try to find another tree to pollinate. Now, Palo Verde is a mix because it has a very dense pollen that doesn't go very far. So it's pollinated 20% by insects and 80% by insects and 20% in the air. But we have so many Palo Verdes, like in Tucson and Phoenix, that it covers a lot of the ground. On my street, in another couple of weeks, it looks like the Wizard of Oz, Golden Alley or
The
Golden
yellow
Driveway.
brick road.
It does, it really is heavy, but that's fortunate because it doesn't blow for miles. So actually, mesquite is worse than Palo Verde because it blows in the wind and you can't see it. And ragweed pollen you can't see either unless you shake the tassel on the plant.
So it's normal this time of year for these allergies to kick in.
Yes. And in the fall, we have the rest of the weeds and the grasses. No
Oh, really?
trees, but weeds and grasses. So ragweed comes back in the fall for an encore. And then you've got the tumbleweeds and your sagebrush and all the other weeds we have here in the West, and a little bit of ragweed too, as I mentioned.
Is there any, like, I know summer gets super hot here, 118, 119 degrees outside, sometimes normally 110. Are there any allergens that come out that time of year that maybe not as bad, but they still come out?
Well, that's when we get a break. Let's say it gets hot this year. It's been kind of warm, so it might be hot by May 15th. From May 15th or May 30th until the monsoon starts after July 4th is the best time of the year because it's hot and the plants have to preserve energy, the trees, and also the pollens drop. So if you're in Buffalo, New York, you're great during the winter when the snow covers the ground. Here, it's when it's dry and hot. But when the monsoons start in the midsummer, then
Hmm.
everything starts growing again.
How long does it usually last then? It almost seems like Arizona, Tucson, like I know people that moved here from out east, from the Midwest to get away from allergies, to be better with their asthma and stuff like that. And then you get here and it seems to me, it almost feels like it's worse here.
Well, if you're taking an allergy history in Boston, people are going to tell you, oh, I was bad in the spring, some in the summer, and then I get bad in the fall. As soon as it froze, I was fine. Here, there's no freeze. And between the fall going right into January and then the pollen starting in late February, March, this year it's a little later. They're starting more in March. You kind of get an all year. So when I ask a patient, do you have symptoms year round? They'll say yes, whereas they wouldn't in a cold climate. But then again, they'll say, but I am worse in March and April when everything's yellow, and I'm bad when all the grasses bloom. So there's two peaks, but there's never a valley that's low, that's that low because we don't have hard freeze.
So Tucson's actually one of the worst cities in the country for allergies, isn't it?
Well, there's reasons. First of all, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, people moved here for their allergy and their asthma, and because it was respite, it was desert, there was not much grass. But unfortunately, they looked in their yards and said, "Well, I don't. My yard is all dust. I'm going to put in grass. I'm going to put in a mulberry tree. I'm going to put in even the University of Arizona put in hundreds of olive trees." And they create. They're from the Mediterranean. They don't belong in the desert, and they create tremendous pollen. So I didn't mention them, but they're among the spring trees. So we planted some of the wrong things. So about 20 years ago, we allergists and pulmonary docs in town got together, lobbied the Pima County, Pima County, to outlaw selling mulberry trees, olive trees, and Bermuda grass sod. And you haven't been able to buy those in this county for over 20 years. But the problem is the olive trees live 250 years. They'll be here when our grandchildren are gone. So, we made some mistakes. If we left it more desert, now there are newer places where you buy homes, you have to put desert landscape in. They don't let you put lawns in. Now I have an artificial lawn. I don't have to water it near as much.
Yeah, it's kind of a point. People came here from the Midwest and to get away from allergies, but they brought the plants that gave them the allergies here.
Kind of. They kind of did, but it's still better than most places, and it's good for asthma. Tucson Medical Center was originally like a sanatorium for people with lung disease and tuberculosis. Doc Holliday moved from New Jersey to Tombstone because of his tuberculosis. The dry air allowed him to be more comfortable, live a few more years. There was no treatment for it back then.
Is there a time of day with allergies that is worse than others?
Yes, the plants release their pollen 4:30 to 5 o'clock in the morning. As it day heats up, they rise and are airborne. And about 5:30, 6 o'clock, they tend to settle back down. So those two times are probably the worst times of the
So
day for allergy,
so early in the
depending on
morning,
when. Yeah,
early in
early
the morning,
morning,
and then on the way
early
home
morning,
almost.
and then yeah, kind of time when you're driving home and stuff. And again, it would depend. If it's a windy day, it'll be all day, of course.
So what can people do to feel better?
Well, I mean, obviously, avoid an allergy. There's three things you could do, basically. You can avoid what you're allergic to. So if they're allergic to cats or dogs, they can keep them out of their bedroom. It's hard to avoid pollen, but when you're in air conditioning or run air purifiers in your house, you're avoiding. Second thing is treatment. There's antihistamines over the counter. There's nasal sprays. All the stuff we used to write for people, they can buy over the counter now. We guide them, but And then the third way, if it's bad and the medicines fail, and the key thing I tell people, if it affects your quality of life, then we talk about allergy injections, where we give them small injections under the skin of what they're allergic to and build it up weekly until they can take very large doses of it. Therefore, they become not cured, but more tolerant.
So it builds up almost an immunity to it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Almost an immunity, not a complete.
So, I went to an allergist probably, I'm in my late 50s, almost near 60. So my parents took me to an allergist in Phoenix when I was probably 13 or 14. And I
Uh-huh.
remember they made me take my shirt off and they took what I called it looked like a rolling meat grater with
Uh-huh.
and they scraped up and down my back, putting little holes, and then they put little drops of things, and then I had to wait, and we saw what turned into a hive. Has it
Right.
changed since then?
A little bit. We sometimes use individual little plastic prickers to prick the top of the skin. You're only breaking the epidermis, the very top layer. You don't
Hmm.
draw blood.
Oh,
You're just
wow.
breaking
Okay.
the top layer. And it can be done by hand with one. You can also buy one that's a rocker now that only has 8 on it. It's not as big as that one. So the nurse rolls it right to left once, and the drops are already on it. So they actually puncture the top of the skin. It's not like a shot, it doesn't penetrate. And then within 20 minutes, in fact, within minutes, a hive will be created. Now, the reason we can skin test people is everybody has mast cells under their skin, even people without allergy. And the mast cells have little granules of histamine, and we don't know why they're there in non-allergic people, but they're there. So when you take an allergic person and you prick the skin with the Bermuda grass pollen and they're allergic to it, the cells know to release histamine, creating a hive. So within 5 or 10 minutes, we can diagnose you are specifically allergic to Bermuda grass with a 95% reliability. So it's very quick and it's the best test there is. There are some other tests. There's a way to do it through the serum, but it's more expensive and you have to wait 2 weeks, and it doesn't have as many tests as we have with the skin prick. So unless somebody has a tattoo all the way across the back or has eczema and we can't do the skin testing, we do that first, or the blood test is a backup.
So you're able to get same day results then.
Yeah, the results are very close now. It used to be the blood testing was not quite as accurate, but it's been improved now, and they're both about 95% accurate. But we mostly do the skin test because you're in, and within a half hour, you know what you're allergic to. So it's great for the patient.
And then you come up with a treatment plan for them.
Yep, yep. And if it's negative, and this is critical, a lot of people have non-allergic, we call it rhinitis. So rhine is nose in Latin, and itis means inflamed. So they have a runny, inflamed nose, but it's not caused by plants and pollen and dogs and cats. It's caused by weather changes and wind and cold air and dust and pollutants and smoke. So you really want to make sure that if you put somebody in allergy injections, you get the person who is sensitive to those organic living things like pollens, molds, etc., and not reacting to irritants and chemicals, as I was pointing out. But very often people have non-allergic rhinitis and they're told they're allergic. So that's where a good allergist can come in and make the clear distinction.
How can people tell the difference between, just having a runny nose because you got a cold, or something, that's running around, the school or whatever, or at work, and an allergy?
Well, how we do it, we start out, we take a history and we take a family history. So it goes through my mother's side. That's where I got my allergies from. And I had allergists as a kid, like you did. In fact, he was so influential, I ended up going into the field because he kind of changed my life positively. So you take a history. If there's a family history, it makes it more likely. If they're seasonal, they may have it all year in Arizona. But I say, what about when the Palo Verdes turn yellow? Oh yeah, doc, that's when I sneeze. It really bothers me. Yeah. And sometimes they're wrong, but very often they were astute enough they picked that up. So, or they'll say when a cat comes by, my friend's cat jumps in my lap, and after 15 minutes I have to get up because my nose itches and I sneeze. Those are all signs of being allergic to the organic things, the living things, pollens, molds, dust, pets, as opposed to weather, wind, pollution, things that we can't really put our finger on.
So do you have a different type of treatment if somebody's allergic to, like, they're all living things, but say an animal like a cat or a dog compared to pollen? Is
Oh
it a
yeah.
different way of doing it?
Yes. Well, it's not a completely different way, but we make extracts. We buy extracts of dog dander, cat dander. The cat dander extract is very good. It's standardized by the FDA, so there's a lot of protein in it. Dog dander is almost as good. So I had a fireman years ago who could not go into houses to resuscitate people if they had pets. So he was always the guy outside standing doing the radio. Well, the other guys, that was the prime position. They didn't get dirty. So the other guys were saying, so can you be? He said, Doc, I can't even be in the rodeo parade, which is the largest non-mechanized parade in the country. I can't be around the horses. The dog sits up front with the driver. I can't be around. It's ruining my career. So we tested him. He was allergic to dog and cat and horse dander. We put him on injections of that for several years. Within a year, he was able to go into the houses. and he ended up being the rider at the rodeo parade. He eventually retired, and I ran into him at Costco some years ago.
Hmm.
These firemen have side business. He owns some duplexes and stuff, but he said, "You got me through the rest of my career, and I really appreciate it." So, yes, we can treat that specifically. And of course, that was one of my, not every case comes out that clean cut and successful, but you remember the really good ones, you know.
So why do some people have allergies and some don't?
It's
Because you
genetic.
just because the skin you said carries some of the histamines, but
Yes. So say your buddy that you grew up with has no allergies. He has histamine in those cells. They will stay there till he's 90. He'll die with them, and they never release the histamine. And people with allergies, they have antibodies to things like pollens, molds, dust, dog, cat. Those antibodies sit on those cells and make them release the histamine. So 25% of the population here inherit the ability to make those antibodies, and they're allergic people. So it's genetic. It's through your mother's side, it's through my mother's side. Sometimes you can't find the link because it was the uncle that everybody said, oh, he had a croupy cough. Well, that uncle really had asthma, but he wasn't diagnosed back in 1940.
mhm.
So if you look carefully, it runs through the families. And what happened here is people moved here for allergies and asthma in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Their children married each other. So now we have a higher incidence of allergy, Tucson, Phoenix, than you would find in New York City or Cleveland or Florida,
Because
because they've married each other and they have the genetic capability. So it's over 25% of the population here.
wow, I had no idea it was genetic. I just thought it was
Yeah.
something okay.
No,
And
it's genetic.
so what you do then over at Aspire Allergy and Sinus, what is it that you guys do to help people get through the allergy season?
Okay. Well, we try to diagnose them, and
Hmm.
if they want testing, we proceed to that and tell them how allergic they are, what they're allergic to, and how bad it is. When you've looked at 1,000 of these tests, I can tell a patient, you're in my lower third. It's not that severe. I think we can get by with antihistamines, nasal sprays. We teach them to do sinus rinses, which sound gross, but they're really fantastic. You may have seen on TV that Navage machine.
Yep. Hmm.
My wife got it for Christmas, and I used it for a long time, then quit using. I'm back on it now because boy, it makes such a difference. And all it is salt water. So you don't necessarily have to take medication. You can do sinus rinses. Over the counter, you've got Zyrtec, Allegra, Claritin, Zizol. They're all available. They're all safe. And then you have sprays like the Flonase Sensimus, which is different than Flonase. I wish they hadn't named it the same. I think it's superior. And then there's other ones like Nasacort, Rhinocort. These all contain steroids, but steroids that don't absorb into the bloodstream. You don't want steroids in your system. So if you spray your nose with a non-absorbing steroid, it works locally, gets broken down, and then you don't get any steroid side effects. Like patients say to me, I don't want any steroids. I go, well, I'm not going to put any steroids in your body, but we're going to spray it in your nose, and it's not going to get into your bloodstream to any degree. And then they're okay with that.
So the best bet, probably if you want to make an appointment just to get in, is go to aspireallergy.com, go through the website, find Tucson. You got two locations here in town?
Yeah.
Where are they at?
One is Central at Country Club and Grant,
Hmm.
and one is at La Choya and Orange Grove in the Northwest. We used to have a practice way down in the Southeast when we were called Alvernon Allergy before we joined Aspire. And that's an underserved area. We don't have that anymore, but I'd like to expand it there because there's a huge population out by Vale,
Yes.
and it's a long drive for them to come to anybody.
Well, hopefully you guys can expand and get bigger and help more
Well,
people.
we hope so. We got to get some more allergists.
It's true. Well, Dr. Makol, I really appreciate you taking time with us today and looking forward to actually meeting you in person sometime. And again, you have two different locations here in the Tucson area. And if you want to make an appointment, go to aspireallergy.com and just follow the links. I went through it the other day. It's actually really easy to do.
And one more quick perk here. Before you come to the doctor, any doctor, fill out all you can online because it does integrate pretty well. And then when you walk in, you don't have to tell them all the stuff that takes all that time. And come early. Bring a book and come a little bit early, and you'll get more time with your doc, which is
Yeah.
what people want.
Yeah, exactly. You get more of that bedside manner.
Right.
Well, Dr. Makol, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Nice talking to you.
All right. Don't forget, once again, aspireallergy.com to make those appointments.